All right, guys, we are live. This is the Difference Makers podcast. My name is Justin Tamani. I'll be your host today. Today we have with us JP Arencibia. He is a former Major League Baseball player, and he currently is working with the Miami Marlins and the TV and the radio broadcast. So, JP, thanks for coming out and joining us for the podcast.
You got it. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, I said you're with Miami, but where are you right now?
I'm in Nashville, actually.
Okay.
My fiance lives in Nashville, and so season ends, and came up here and got to. I'm going to be here all off season with her, and then you know they have those airplanes that make it a little bit more accessible to go back and forth. So it's not the easiest thing, but you got to make it work.
Right on. And have you been enjoying the playoffs? Do you actually watch baseball outside of broadcasting?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I'm honestly maybe when I got done playing, I was a little not not upset at the game, but it's more like, all right, I just wanted a break.
Yeah.
I've done it since I was 3 years old, and so I didn't follow it as much. But now I actually really enjoy it, and especially doing what I do. You try to learn even from the broadcast guys. You listen to how they talk about it. Either the pregame, the postgame, during the game, whatever it may be. And then I'm watching the game as well as just a baseball fan. So it's been fun to watch. I mean, the Braves have been fun to watch, I think, too, as well. They've been exciting. That series with the Dodgers, you know how that goes, and then Houston and Boston. So I love it. It's something now that I appreciate more than I used to when I was playing and when I just got done.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to ask you, how was that transition from playing on the field to getting into the booth? Was it a slow transition? Was it something that you knew you wanted to do?
It's funny. I almost didn't want to do it in the sense of I hated the media. Like when I was playing, I was like, man, these guys kind of are clowns in the way they went about their business. And then I was a person who could always speak well. And as a catcher, you really do know the game, the intricate parts of the game in and out, right? You have to know everything as a catcher. You have to know the bullpen, you have to know the pitching staff, you have to know the defense, and obviously I was a hitter, so you have to know hitting. So you really have to deal with every facet of the game. And so when you have that knowledge and you can kind of talk about it and explain it and be concise with it, that's where people started asking me, hey, do you think you want to do this? And at the beginning, I was a little reluctant, and then more and more, I started enjoying it because I figured, you know what, I can be a kind of a voice of the what I would have wanted, and it's I think you have to be able to break down people, and when they're doing bad or whatever, but it's just still keeping the respect of guys watching the game, but also telling the truth. And I just think that was really something I take into consideration when I've done this, is like, hey, I'm going to be honest, I'll be credible, and I'll also have the opportunity to have guys ask me like, hey, why did you say this, or why did you say that? So I'm always around for guys to be able to ask me questions, and be accountable for what I'm saying.
And then when you say those guys, you mean the players on the field or just everybody in general?
I mean, the players on the field more than
Yeah.
anything, right? And that's the one thing I think as players, a lot of people get upset because it's like, you know, in the media, you're paid to give your opinion. But as a former player, I take a lot of pride in my opinion being accurate. And that's where conversations happen with players where I'm like, hey, Brian Anderson, I'm talking about you on the pregame. Like, this is what I think. Tell me what you're doing. What adjustments are you making? And so that when I'm speaking through the player and not just, spitballing stuff out there, where as players, you read it, you see it, you watch it, and you sit there. And sometimes, a lot of times you're like, and that's not the truth. And so that's one thing I always wanted to make sure is like really taking a pride in being accurate in the things that I'm saying on the pre and post game show or in the radio, whatever I do.
Yeah, I respect that a lot because you're not just saying it just to get a rise out of people or or get a little clickbaity with it. So that's good. Because did you run into that as a player?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think in Toronto, I mean, the media there is a little tough. It's a big market, and my first interview actually in the big leagues was a person, I won't say his name, but it was a person interviewing me, and he had a microphone, right? And so he's holding up this microphone, and at the end of the interview, he puts it in his pocket. So I think the interview's done. right? Like, I think what we're talking about is off the record. And
Oh,
then literally the headline of the article was the last things that I said after he had put this away when we were talking. And I'm thinking, man, it's kind of shady. And so that's how I started. That's how I started in the big leagues in one of my first interviews. So, you learn that these guys try to have to make something interesting, but also now being on this side of it, do you blame people? Not really, because they're trying to make a name for themselves, and everybody, you're either the guy who's like the one who bashes players and loves to, bash guys and create issues, or you're somebody who's maybe in between, or somebody who just is like kind of on one side. But I just think that, I understand it now more than I used to. But before, I used to be upset because you think that people are just trying to lead you into, like you said, the clickbait, or getting that reaction that you're trying to hold back, but they get it out of you, and then all of a sudden it's a big ordeal.
do you find that guys now are more aware of that kind of thing, like, and are more closed off to media
A hundred
because of
percent,
that kind of stuff? Yeah.
100%. And I think too, what's hurt sports and media. Obviously, COVID has been brutal for in general, but now, before, you used to be able to come into the clubhouse, and we used to be able to
Yeah.
come into the clubhouse, have those conversations, talk to guys, and really kind of have that face to face. Now you're not allowed in that clubhouse anymore, and you're allowed, on the field, but to have a little bit of a conversation. But now that's different. Now you're even creating a bigger separation, right? Where
Yeah.
before, that was a big part of that, player and media, coming together. Now they don't have to. There's no So players are even more like, good. I don't want, because the truth is you don't want them in your clubhouse anyways, because
Yeah.
that's where it's kind of your home, right? It's kind of your second home. But now it's created even more because they don't have to really have those conversations, because you're really getting a manager on Zoom, and you're not having to have those conversations. So I think it's becoming even more of a gap. But yeah, I mean, social media, people are starting to understand more, obviously, the downfall of it, what it can create, the negative publicity it can create. And I think obviously now people are more like shut off to it.
Yeah. At Like, I'm reading headlines today, just kind of scrolling through some stuff real quick, and it was like, man, they literally just posted this with no context, no information, just to like bait out this one player. And it was just, it wasn't even a quote. It was like, this might have happened. And it was like, social media is so quick to just jump on these little potential clickbaity things. And I started just reading the comments, which I never do. And I was like, oh, there's no context to these. And now thousands of people are all just speculating. And it's just like to get that engagement. And that drives me nuts.
Well, I mean, I was one of the players in the forefront of that in Toronto when I went out there and I said some things about the media members, of like that. I didn't really have anything good to say about them, because these people, one of them was, had cheated the game and things that, and I mean, it's public that what I said.
Yeah.
And then, the next day it was like, it went from me being like this media guy. Cause when I was a player there, I did everything, community service. I won the Roberto Clemente award. I won all these different things of what I was, the human being that I was away from the field. But then when that happened, it was like the media like switched it around and made me this monster. And I started seeing articles, and I was like, wait a second, now all these things are changing about me. But so you learn that they can create whatever they want, and there is really no accountability, right? There's no one that's governing it and saying like, hey, you can't say this, you can't say that. There's a freedom of the press. So um, it is what it is. It's unfortunate. You hope that people have more, I guess, self-worth. Like, that's something that I told you, like, I take a lot of pride in, is being accurate.
Yeah.
You hope people have a little bit more respect for themselves and for the others. But unfortunately, there's people out there that really don't care and just want to get, kind of their step forward in being that clickbait or that shock material or whatever it may be.
Just for people who aren't sure, can you quickly explain the Roberto Clemente Award? Because that's a pretty significant award in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, it's I was nominated for the Blue Jays, and it's obviously somebody who, represents what Roberto Clemente represented, which is selfless and somebody who gives back to the community and really, embodies what it is to be a person that, is selfless and wants to take care of others more than themselves and be an example and do things the right way. And so
Yeah.
um, that was something that I, obviously it was a very big thing to me. I also won the Hustle and Heart Award for the Blue Jays, which was nominated by the media, which is, funny how that changed from me being that
Yeah.
guy to then all of a sudden them kind of getting on me. But, that's just, you just learn that the media can spin it however they want. And unfortunately, now in this day and age, like you said, it takes 1 second to hit Twitter, and then it takes a few people to see it. Instagram, same thing. And then all of a sudden it's blown, out of proportion. And then it's a big ordeal.
Yeah. Because you were in the first wave of active players during the kind of the new wave of social media, the new media. Twitter was like just becoming a thing when you broke into the league. I don't even think Instagram was around yet. Like,
No.
though you were in that first wave of like, you kind of paved the path for guys who are playing now, of like how to interact and how to grow a following and grow your own brand. So how did you deal with that? And like, how did you deal with the pressures of that at the time?
Well, what's funny is that guys on my team were very like, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I was one of the last ones of the group of guys that were, out in social media. I was one of the last guys to kind of join, where I was like, they're like, hey, you got to join, you got to join. And finally I was like, all right, I'll join. And I did it, but I did it reluctantly because I knew that what I was signing up for, in the sense of like, you're putting yourself out there now, and you have to make sure that you can handle things, because now what I realized in short time was, not only do you get great comments, but you get a lot of bad comments.
Yeah.
And, as a person who cared a lot, right? Like, I was a person who, call it whatever, call it insecurities, call it ego, call it competitiveness, whatever it is. Um, I hated to see negative comments about me. I hated to see people writing, mean things and saying certain things and coming after me as a player and all that stuff. And so then it almost became like an addiction, but in a bad way, of like reading these negative comments. And then, not only was I trying to compete against the best of the best on the world, I was trying to compete against them at the major league level. And then all these keyboard warriors, I guess is the right way to say it, of like trying to prove them wrong. And, so it just became, I'd sit there at night and get upset about somebody who had nothing ever to do with my life.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden now I put myself out there, and now these people, if I didn't have it, I would have never dealt with that. And then I had it, and I'm all of a sudden like, man, I'm dealing with all this negativity, and it's like taken away from my life in a sense.
Yeah. So how, I kind of brought your conversation how your conversation got brought to my attention is I saw you on a podcast that you talked a lot about your mental health and how you dealt with all of that. And how is it that, your playing days or your game was impacted by social media and how that made you kind of spiral? Were you able to talk to anybody at that time, or, because it was kind of new, the conversation wasn't as open? How did you deal with that and your mental health and playing and the combination of everything?
Well, a lot of it, I mean, as a lot of guys do, I feel like you internalize a lot of things, and you just don't feel like talking about it. And you just, in sports, I think one of the biggest things is like, hey, tough it up, tough it up, toughen up, and you'll get past it. You get past it, and I can do that with a hurt shoulder, or I can do that, with a knee that's bothering me, or a hamstring. But then what you realize is that can't do that with your brain. And a lot of times I dealt with anxiety. You look back, and there was a lot of things even as a kid where I used to get anxious. You don't really think about it. You didn't know about it, what it was, or how you reacted to things. And that's how I reacted to things, was kind of overblowing situations. If I got a cough, I thought I was dying. Like I thought I had cancer. I was in trouble. Like, if, I was a hypochondriac. So, and then all of a sudden now with baseball, you start worrying about all these things and trying to impress others, and then all of a sudden now, the anxiety amounts in a different part of your life, and you start to, again, I was having panic attacks, worried what was going to happen with my career, what worried, well, how could I figure it out, like, and you just, and all I was doing was like continuing, because I was struggling. All I can do is continue to read like this negative feed, like it was just constant negativity. And then, you know we're all human, we all, as much as you want to say like, oh, it doesn't bother me, it gets to you, right? Like it does.
Yeah.
And so, there was help, but at that point, there really wasn't any, like, I guess that it wasn't as open as it was. Right now, we talk about mental health, and like guys can open up. Anyone can open up about, like, I struggle with anxiety. You see like Kevin Love talking about depression, DeMar DeRozan. Like, you're seeing all these people
Yeah.
talk about things now in prominent places where people think like, oh, this person's bulletproof. They never deal with anything. Like, that's not true. Everybody deals with something. It's just, are they going to talk about it or they don't? And that's where I think now getting help is a lot more of a less taboo thing, to where back then it was like, man, I don't want to talk to the person that the Blue Jays employ,
Yeah.
because if I tell them that I'm having panic attacks, they're going to tell the team, and then they have to make a decision on my career. And so, like, I'm not going to put myself out there and trust somebody that could possibly, I'm going into arbitration. We're talking about millions of dollars. Is somebody going to want to put millions of dollars into somebody who deals with anxiety and put in panic attacks? Who knows? But I didn't want to deal with it, so I didn't talk
Yeah.
to anybody about it.
So at the time, you didn't talk to anybody about it. You just kind of shut it out and let it kind of deal with itself. When was it that you realized, like, hey, I need to talk to somebody about this, or that you could go to somebody?
I would say it was later. So in 2015 is when I
Okay.
finally was like, I had a panic attack in spring training, and I was like, this isn't good. I need to figure something out. And I started talking to somebody, and then I got medicated.
Yeah.
Um, I started taking, at that point, I was taking Lexapro, and it really started to help me. That's something that really started to help me, and it allowed me to, like, not fixate on stuff, because I think, with anxiety just, it takes all your fears and just like zeroes in on them, and then, like, it's like the constant, like, chatter at that fear. And so I think, the way it explained to me was Lexapro would allow me to have those thoughts but not fixate them, will allow it to kind of roll off my shoulders a little bit more,
Yeah.
and be able to be a little bit more even keel, which it did. And then, I spoke about it publicly, and then had some people talk, write to me like, man, I deal with the same thing. How do you deal with it? And so just understanding too that I wasn't by myself made me feel like, okay, like, I'm not crazy. Like, this is okay. Like, I'm not the only person that struggles with this. And, that allowed me to continue to move forward. But I really didn't, like, sit down and get like real help until, like, during the pandemic.
Oh,
um,
really?
where I was like seeing a therapist every week, and like really, because when one thing you learn is like, you can have the medication, you can do these things, but you still have to handle the things that you needed to kind of handle. And I think that sitting in the pandemic was, but you're by yourself, you're locked up, and I think, you start to have all these thoughts and create, things that pop in your head, and you start thinking like, oh, this isn't good. And that's when I
Yeah.
really started to see a therapist, and like really working with somebody. And that has helped a lot, because it just allowed me to really get those things out, talk about them, hit them face on. And I think that's, those are things, when you have those conversations, and the more we have them, the better it really is for people to move forward.
100%. Well, one of the reasons that, I wanted to have this conversation so much is, like I was mentioning, you had put something on your social media, you'd done another podcast and talked about this, but this was also something that I replied to you about, that I said, like, I'm going through some stuff right now. And like, I really appreciated that you're putting this message out, when you came up as a player, I was actually working at the stadium, and I was somebody that was like, I'm a huge baseball fan, and I really looked up to you, and to see you put that out there and to be so honest about it, I was like, okay, like, yeah, like I should do the same thing. And actually, I started seeing a therapist fairly regularly after that for a little while, and I really thank what you put out there to help me get through some of the stuff I was going through. So
Well, I
I
mean,
appreciate it so much.
thank you too. I mean, that's a thing, man. As I think, and listen, like it's crazy because there's so many people that struggle with stuff, and especially in sports, because a lot of times too, and this is what people like, you're driven one way, right? Like to win, to win, to win, to win. Can't fail,
Yeah.
you can't fail, you can't fail. Even though you play a game of failure, like we're still competitive, right? And so
Oh yeah.
you can get jaded because it also can like affect your normal life of I can't fail on this part of my life. I can't fail on my relationships part of my life. Like all these different things that you put this pressure on it, and it kind of really, it's not easy. And the more we internalize things, the harder it gets. And then I guess the more, and the flip side of that is the more you have the conversations, the more you talk to people, the more um, people open up about what they've dealt with, the better situations become. And that's where I think, where talking to me is even therapeutic, because could be somebody that at some point watches this and says, like, I can get help. Like, again, I was like crazy against medicine. Like, I was like, I don't want to, I can do this. I'll eat healthy and I train hard and I'll do this and I'll figure it out. And I was like, you know what? It helped me. Medicine helped me.
Yeah. Was there one thing that made you realize like I need this support now? Was it like that one instance in spring training, or was there something else that triggered it?
Um,
Hey guys, Justin here. Just a reminder, like and subscribe down below for more content coming soon from WODProof and the Difference Makers.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, over time, yeah, in spring training, and then, when you retire and you actually don't have that outlet that you used to have, then you really have to figure out, like, dang, okay, now I'm struggling. I don't have a game to go to, I'm like, it's just me and me, and
Yeah.
and I think that's when you start getting the thoughts in your head of like, I mean, crazy thoughts. Like, I mean, stuff that pop in my heads of like, even like literally going like, man, I got a gun. Like, I got a gun. I can shoot myself if I wanted to. And you're thinking that, you're like, man, what the heck? Why would I think that? Or just like, it's like when you start to normalize, even when you're at a building and you're at the balcony, you're like, man, what if I jump? And you're like, oh crap, why did I think that? Like, well,
Yeah.
a lot of people think that. You're not, doesn't mean that you're like trying to jump.
Yeah.
It's just, but because you had that thought and no one says like, man, yeah, I thought that, uh, you start to question like, oh crap, what does that mean? And you start to panic of what it could possibly mean. And so, those are the little things of the conversations that I think that the more and more we have them, the better off we all become.
Yeah. I I agree. And did you see Dak Prescott? Did you see that little article about him today that he's been wearing? He's been writing on his wrist tape, "Ask for help."
Oh no, I didn't see
So
that.
Dak Prescott, the quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys,
Yeah.
has been, everybody like does a little something here and there, but on his white wrist tape, he's writing. I think all season he's been writing, "Ask for help."
Yeah. Cause I saw his brother had committed suicide, I'm pretty sure. Right.
That I'm not
Oh,
100% sure about, but
let me, I want to be accurate of when I'm pretty sure, that's something like that. But that's something, when you start to, yeah, that's what it was.
yeah,
And, again, those are conversations that I think need to happen. And those are conversations, again, when you're struggling and you don't think that there's a way, like there's always a way. And it
mhm,
might not be easy. It might not be, pleasant, but there's a way. And it's just continuing to push forward and work on it and work on it. And I think, that's why I think medicine can help, with people. I mean, I'm sure you saw the Drew Robinson story. If you haven't seen that, you got to watch
no,
that.
I gotta check that out.
He's a baseball player who tried to commit suicide,
Oh, I did.
and he
Yes,
shot himself in the head and survived. And
yeah,
obviously, he's a big advocate. But it's like, this is a kid who was in the like literally just in the big leagues, and he was still playing, and this is what
Mhm.
happened. So, we all can get to these depths, but when we talk about it, I think that's what can help us get back out of those depths.
Yeah. And he came back to play a bit too.
Yeah, yeah, he came back to play, and then he ended up retiring, and now he works for the Giants, for dealing with like a mental health coach in a sense, and
Mhm.
so it's pretty cool.
Do you find that guys are more open to mental coaching today than they were when you were playing, or is it still very taboo?
No, I think it's a lot more like accepted and understood that everybody struggles, and you know especially at that level where you're constantly like have somebody like on you, and again, it's not just professional athletes, everybody deals with it.
Yeah.
But I think, again, more and more as these people who are public figures have these conversations and talk about it and open up, then I think everybody else can kind of really understand that A, they're not alone, and B, that there's a way to get help, and C, like, do it, like actually take the step, because it's could be daunting, it could be scary, you could think like, man, I don't want to admit something's wrong with me or whatever, but it's like when you have those conversations and you start to realize like nothing's wrong with you, you're actually normal, and you have the same thoughts that everybody else. It's just for whatever reason a certain thought tripped you up that didn't trip up somebody else, but another thought tripped them up that didn't trip you up.
Yeah. Dude, the and I can I mean, I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm just processing it, and it's like, yeah, I think like I've been in that same situation where it's like, yeah, like this little thing happened and it stuck with me, and something else just rolled off my back, and it was just like nothing. But it could be the day, it could be the timing, it could be so many little things, and it just how you let it impact you is pretty significant.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, and this is what's crazy too, is that then when you get into the fitness world, and it's really why I like fitness so much, and obviously, I think I want to be healthy and stuff like that. But why I love fitness is because it's really a battle of your own mind, a lot of the times, right? And like I used
Yeah.
to train Olympically, when I was playing, and
Mhm.
I used to laugh because it's crazy how powerful our mind is. But I literally, when it got to putting on two plates, like
Yeah.
I can get as close as I could to 225, and I'd put the chips on and all that stuff, and all of a sudden I'd get the two plates, and it was like I would try to I pulled high enough, but I in my mind I could not get under. I couldn't get under, and it
Yeah.
was like I'm watching video, and it's like, dude, you're pulling this way high enough to be able to get under. But in my mind, I'm like, man, it's gonna crunch me. I'm gonna get hurt. I'm gonna this, and then it
Yeah.
was literally like it went from me being at 215 or 220 to now 225, and it's like I'm failing every time. And then that like, but if if I put 225 with just regular plates and I'd pull it, didn't notice it, and I'd pull it and catch it, you're like, oh, I did it. But that's how strong our mind is.
Yeah. It's all like what you perceive in that, like that little that there's always that number. Like I know guys that won't lift certain weights. They'll skip a weight to go heavier or make like a big jump to go heavier because they're like, nah, like I'll never lift 245. I'll only go, 230, 240, 250, 250 plus, never 245. Because that number gets in their head and they just skip it.
It's one guy who's trained with, his name is Charlie Patron, and he used to talk about like how when like Russian style, that
Mhm.
he had a teacher who was like Russian, and they would put plates and wouldn't tell you what it was, like wouldn't tell you the weight, and you'd have
Yeah.
to pull it and catch it, and because that's how powerful it is, right? Like if and even if you, let's say it was, you saw something that was 10 kilos and it said 10 kilos and it was 15,
Yeah.
and you're pulling it and you're like, oh man, this feels good. And you're like, well, it's not 10, it's 15. You're like, what? But
Yeah.
that's how our brain is.
Yeah. Sometimes it just got to get out of our own heads in order to perform, right?
Not sometimes, like a lot of the times.
When you were playing in your playing days, like what were those things that like helped you relax? Did you have anything that like you did that kind of just allowed you to relax and kind of zone out? And maybe it was on the field, maybe it was off the field.
Off days, you would say golf was something, as funny as it is, like golf was something that would help me kind of get away. The tough part about baseball is, and this is where I tell people, with mentally, that's why it's such a mentally like tough game, is because there's times where you're playing 20 games straight. So
Yeah.
when you want that mental break, there is no mental break. You're like coming to the yard every single day, right? Like, for example, in the NFL, you play on Sunday, you got 6 days, right,
Yeah.
to your next game. Hockey, you don't play 20 in a row, you have a few days off in between. And basketball, the same thing. And so that's the tough part about baseball. It's like I tell people, like, it's like you're underwater and you just want to come up from air for air, and they're like, well, no, because you got 19 more games to go before you can, like, and especially when you're struggling. When you're going good, listen, everybody's like, oh, let's go to the field. You feel good
Yeah.
about it. You're like, dang, all right, I want to play every day. But when you're struggling, you're like, God, I just want to break. God, I just want to break. God, I just want to break. And you're not able to do that. And at that point, when I was playing, I think now I'm a little bit more, I would say, well versed if I was still playing, but like understanding meditation, right? Like I was like,
Yeah.
what is meditation? Now I think, there's apps now that obviously you can meditate and do things every day, or that's more of a conversation, or, whatever it may be for that person to have journaling, like all these different things now that I think are things that people are okay with speaking about, or as opposed to like, oh, I don't meditate. Like, what do I look like? Like, am I, some kind of like monk? Like, no, it's, you know what I'm saying? Like now it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, oh, you meditate? Oh, sweet. So do I. I have, well, what app do you, it's just different.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. But I think also people don't realize how long you guys are at the park for. So you're not just playing a game. You're not just there for 3, 4 hours. You're there for what time would you roll in for a 7 o'clock start?
1 o'clock.
So you're
Like,
there.
yeah, 1 to like midnight. And it's getting there, and it's like you get there, you work out, you eat, now you're watching film, then you have meetings, then you have batting practice, then you're doing all your pregame stuff, then you're playing. Then after the game, you're eating, you're decompressing. Like it's
Mhm.
it's a it's a full day of work. Like you said, people don't realize you're there every single day early. And if you're dealing with an injury or something, then you're doing your stuff to prepare so you can play that day. And then you finish the game and cold tub, hot tub, whatever it may be, and then next day.
Right back at it. Or travel.
Yeah.
Travel schedule is pretty grueling. If you do that West Coast trip.
Yeah, to the West Coast to the East Coast, or East Coast to West Coast. I mean, and it's usually they give you a day off, but it's still, it's. I'm not going to say like, oh, it's so tough, because at the end of the day, like we're flying on a private plane, we're staying at the nice hotels, and we have good food and all that stuff. But those are things. Speaking about food, like as dumb as it may seem, like now since I've been out of the game, like nutrition has become like so much more a part of the decisions being made on a daily basis, right? Like
Yeah.
when I was playing, post game meal was like Chinese food one day, and like Italian like the next day, and like it was pizza and different things. Now, pregame meals are, grilled chicken, brown rice, veggies, salmon. Like there used to be candy everywhere. There's no more, like they've realized too, like how important, like, man, wait a second, we're paying these guys millions of dollars.
Yeah.
It's like, I got this super intense sports car. I'm not going to be putting in 87, right? I'm going to be putting in 93. And and I think that's where they, now even as much as that. And then when we talk about mental health, you start to learn about dieting and how important food, and how food can, make a difference in our life and our gut and all these different things. That those are all things that now they have a real big onus on. But before it was like, man, you didn't think about that.
Are teams providing, like teams provide the food, let's just say in the stadium, but are teams providing like the nutritional support, like the kind of counseling towards like, okay, this is like your diet regimen, this is your training regimen? Like I know there's trainers and things like that, but are there nutritionists on the staff? Like are those becoming more part of the regular conversation?
Big time. But that
Yeah.
wasn't like before. It was like one person would show up once a month and like have a conversation or whatever. But now it's like the nutritionist is there every day,
Yeah.
and it's creating these meals and creating these things. And listen, also there's so much more. I wear the Whoop, right? There's
Yeah.
so much more technology of instant feedback of,
Hmm.
okay, I have this, what in my body, glucose monitors, all these different things that now you can actually test and get like instant feedback, right? But they can only control what you do in the field. At the end of
Yeah.
the day, that's the truth, right? Like when I go home, I got to be professional and make my own decisions. Am I going to go home and order a pizza at midnight after the game, or am I going to, have yogurt and blueberries, and that's going to be my like pre-bed room, my bed routine? Or breakfast, am I going to wake up and crush muffins and whatever, or am I going to go and have a bowl of oatmeal with some berries and you know some avocado, good fats and protein? Like it's all based when you're away from it. But I think now, because there's so much more information, I think now guys are more inept to make better decisions, right? Like
Yeah.
I used to think, like, man, I was playing baseball and I signed, I'm a first round pick. And like, I used to think like, okay, going to Firehouse Subs and getting a huge sub with turkey and no cheese and some veggies, like that was great for me. And not that it's bad for you. It could be better than a better, option. But it was like, now I'm like, crap, all right, well, I'm going to make chicken and sweet potatoes and have, brown rice or whatever, all these different, I just more knowledgeable now than I was before. And teams are spending more money on it now than they were
Yeah.
before.
And is that trickling down into the minor leagues as well with how they bring players up in the development system?
100%. So it's crazy too. Like the difference between the big leagues and the minor leagues it was so crazy to me to think. Like I was in big league camp, my first spring training ever, right? I'm in major league
Yeah.
camp. You go there, you order. It's like, I want egg whites. Can I have oatmeal? I mean, the spread is like nice, right? Like
Yeah.
you're getting all the opportunities. I went down to minor league camp and I was like, hey, where's the omelet maker and where's the omelet machine? And they're like, that don't happen down here. They're like, there's cereal, there's some bags of oatmeal, some yogurt, and like and it was like, okay, well, they'll have pancakes out there with like a bowl of syrup and like very different, right? And like
Yeah.
post game in big league spring training, you're having like a spread of like chicken and vegetables and carbs and fruit. In the minor leagues, it was like a lineup of subs and, hey, chicken salad sub, tuna sub, this sub. And it's like, hey, sorry if you got here too late, like all that's left is tuna. You're like, I don't eat fish. Like, well, you're gonna have tuna. Like, it's just. But now in the minor
Mhm.
leagues, man, food is catered like for
Oh,
minor league.
really?
So the Dodgers with Gabe Kapler were one of the first like teams to really start spending money, like all organic meals through the minor leagues, everything.
Yeah.
And then teams started really catching on to doing that because, dude, when I first signed, I went to short season A ball, and my pregame meal used to be like peanut butter and jelly and Oreo cookies.
Jeez.
But that was what they supplied, right? Like unless I
Yeah.
brought any other food, like that's what I was dealing with. And so now those are getting catered, good foods.
Yeah. And they just announced that Major League Baseball is going to provide housing for minor league players this coming season as well, which is like minor league players, like if people don't know, can you give me a rough breakdown of like what a salary for a minor league player was like even 5 years ago, 10 years ago?
Well, so I mean, I always preface this with like I was a first round pick, so I was very blessed. Like I had made some money out of the draft, but I'll never forget this. Like I'm playing, and I think my first 2 week check was like 475. So I was
And this is
making,
a professional baseball player in the minor
yeah,
leagues.
yeah, in the minor leagues, I was making like $900 a month. Now you have to pay for your own board, your own rent,
Yeah.
right? You got to pay for your own food away from the field. And then at the field, you had to pay a clubhouse manager. Let's call it at that level, it was like $7 a day. But you had to pay him because he's the one that's buying the turkey, buying the cookies, buying the bread, buying the peanut butter, right? So like you're still in a sense paying.
Yeah.
And I was grateful that I was able to sign for a nice bonus. But the guy who, signed for $1,000 was making under 12 grand a season. And
Jeez.
that's for 6 months. He's making under 12 grand. And then he has to pay. So like, man, I've gone into condo, like apartments of guys that there'd be just blow up mattresses everywhere. 6 guys in a condo because that's how they could afford it. And they used to go and buy a ton of pasta because pasta was cheap.
Yeah.
Put like Parmesan cheese on it and all, just like that's what they would eat on. So like for me, a lot of times I'd go with those guys to the grocery store and say, hey, listen, you cook a meal, I'll eat at your house, I'll buy the groceries. Just so like they can have something, because it was like, dude, you're just grinding. I mean, you're scratching through.
Yeah.
And now though, I will say that now that's changed, right? Like obviously housing is another step, and they've increased the pay a little bit, which I mean, increased the pay a little bit. What are they making? Like 16 grand in 6 months? Like,
Yeah.
but at least now they're providing good meals. They're providing good food. There's a lot more things that they've done to make the right decisions to help people. But, at the beginning, it is what it is.
Yeah. It like minor league stories that I've heard from people over the years are just wild to me. Like you sign as a professional athlete and it's just like, here's some peanut butter and jelly. Like, we'll see you tomorrow.
Dude, and
That's
imagine, like I went to University of Tennessee in the SEC, like
yeah.
good program. We're staying at like embassy suites. We're having like catered meals after games. Like we
Yeah.
have a sports athlete cafeteria. To when I sign, I'm in the middle of nowhere in the New York Penn League, and post game, they're bringing in the extra hot dogs and hamburgers that weren't sold during the game into the clubhouse, so that's what we could have after, right? And I'm going like, what the heck? Like I thought
Yeah.
this was supposed to be. I just signed to play in the pros. Like
Yeah.
college is way better than this.
And I mean, University of Tennessee, Division I school, beautiful facilities. And like what these Division I schools are providing to their athletes, their student athletes now is incredible.
Oh,
Seeing some of these walkthroughs. Ooh.
I mean, you have nutrition fueling stations, and like, I mean, you
Yeah.
go on the spot and have, whatever protein shake you want. You go into the cafeteria for the athletes. It's like unbelievable spreads of foods and like, I mean, chicken, steak, great carbs, and they're nutritionists that are controlling all of this. And like,
Mhm.
I mean, the Tennessee weight room, it's like a dream, right? It looks like you're like, dude, this is like the Taj Mahal of like where I walk in and I'm like, I can do every exercise on the planet here. I'll sleep, give me a cot and I'm good.
Yeah.
But that's the stuff that they have now. But also those universities make a ton of money with football and, different sports.
Yeah. Now, the other thing too is the universities are now able to athletes are now able to profit off of their name and likeness. If you were playing now, you could sign a contract with like a supplement company, right? And they
Yeah.
could pay you out and you could be in the NCAA, where in the past you couldn't.
No.
So
I don't agree with it. I don't think that it's good, because a lot of people complain about, a lot of the athletes complain about how much money the school makes and how much, they don't get a piece of the pie. Well, if you think about it, you really are, because you're getting an education for free, pretty
mhm.
much, right? And then I think that the NIL, when you're making money off the field, it takes out a lot of teams, right? Like you think about it, at University of Alabama or Tennessee, these are college towns.
Yeah.
Well, people are going to make money off the field because they're in a college town. But if you're in a big city, like where I'm from, Miami, like University of Miami, you think anybody cares? Like that when you have the Marlins, the Heat, the Panthers, you have all the teams, and it's like, I'm a brand. I'm not going to, the car dealer's not going to be like, hey, Joe Schmo, pitcher for the University of Miami, come to there. No, they're going to be like, Sandy Alcantara, who's the ace for the Marlins. Like, this is who, that's the difference. And then the other part of that is when you talk about professional sports and making money for your name and likeness, there's unions, there's governing bodies of this, right? And so well, what I don't like is in the major leagues, right? At the end of the season, you get a licensing check. And that's all the money that's pulled together, divvied into the players equally, depending on time, right? So if you have a full year of service, let's call it $30,000, you get a check. If you have half a year of service, well, it'd be 15, right? But everybody, there's like a time for that. Because that allows everybody to get a piece of the pie. Because if not, if we just went off of, jersey sold, then the guy who was the 25th player in the roster would never make any money because of name and likeness, right?
Yeah.
So now in college, think about this. I'm the star running back, and I'm going against a scout team defense and blowing these guys' brains out every single day because it's like, dude, your job is to literally just pretend that you're the other team and you're just giving me work. So I'm blowing you up and I'm making money. But that kid who just is getting dominated and crushed and is just a test dummy in a sense so that he can be in the practice squad and be a part of the program doesn't get anything. And that's where I think that there's a little bit of a separation on how, things were done.
That's a good way to look at that because I never considered that side of the coin. I just saw it as being the opportunity for the athletes to potentially benefit off of themselves, where in the past they had no opportunity to do that during their college years. But that's a good point. I didn't realize that the licensing thing was a kind of an even split pot across is it across the union or is it the team or?
It's just each player, right? You're a union member. If Justin plays a full year in the big leagues, and the full year licensing check, after it's all the percentages are done, if it's 30 grand, you make 30. If I got a full year of service, I made 30. It didn't matter if I hit 100 with one home run, but I was on the team all year, and you hit 400 and you were the all-star and all that stuff. Like, you're going to make your money on what you do for a living. I'm not going to make as much as you, but the way it kind of evens out in the sense of at least opportunity is everybody gets the same piece of the pie.
Okay. I didn't realize that. That's a good way of doing it, but that's like the difference of having a very strong union and just kind of changing the rules on the fly.
Yeah, exactly. And that's anything governed, right? Like, that's the difference between having a, kind of a governing body oversee something as opposed to right now, it's just like throwing crap on a wall and like, okay, if it sticks. But if you think about it again, like you're a donor, you're a big donor at a big university.
Yeah.
Like, I own a car dealership. What they did was allow kind of cheating in a way to become like okay, because it's like, hey, I'm gonna do this commercial so I can give you 10 grand for this commercial. And it's like, well, am I going to go to Alabama where that guy's going to give me those 10 G's, or am I going to go to another school where I'm not going to get that, right? Like, I just think that they opened up Pandora's box and made it not what it's supposed to be about, which for me, college is like the one time where it's like everybody's together. I didn't have money. My roommate didn't have money. We didn't have money. We're all working together to try to win. We hang out together. Once you get to the pros, it's like, man, I'm 24 in the big leagues. This guy's 33 with 6 kids. This guy's 40. He's got his own family. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just different.
Yeah. Would you say that there's a different sense of like team pride in university sports and in professional sports?
100%. Not even. There's like, I have a text message of 20 plus guys that I went to university with. I talked to maybe 5 guys that I played in the pros with. It's very different, right? It's there's still a lot of, I guess, cliquey in the good teams. You can try to keep it differently, but like, single guys are probably going to hang with the single guys and they're going to go out with each other. And then the married people are, families are going to maybe do their thing. And then now you put into also Spanish speakers are going to hang out with Spanish speakers. And, there's very much of that, like, segregation in the sense, I guess, is the, hey, the Latins are with the Latins. the white dudes are with the white dudes. Like it,
Mhm.
there's good teams. You're able to kind of mesh it as close as possible,
Yeah.
but everybody's on different parts of their life. In college, you're 18 through 22,
Yeah.
and you're just trying to come together to play and like maybe make something of yourself, get an education, but you're just really with each other. You're hanging out with each other in the study hall and eating and party. You actually hang out with each other, and it's like when you get to the pros, it's very different.
Yeah.
A job.
That-
It really is a job.
yeah. Okay. So it's treated very differently in that sense.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the guys that are still vulnerable, or I would guess say innocent to understanding that it's a job,
Mhm.
will learn one way or another. I learned it real quick when
Yeah.
I played the second half hurt, thinking that I was doing something for the organization because I was fighting through it, like fighting through it. These guys got my back, I got their back, and I'm going to push through it. They know what I'm going through. I was getting taped every day on my hamstring, like like ace bandage wrapped around my hip and my hamstring so that it could help out. And when it came down to it, they released me after that season, and it was like, wait a second, you guys knew what I was struggling with, and that's why my numbers ended up where they were at. But it's a business, and
But they'd
so
see the numbers on paper and go, well,
it
next
is what
guy's
it is.
up. He's 5 years younger. Hmm.
You learn it's a business.
Yeah. I saw a quote from, or I heard Josh Donaldson drop a line that said, "This isn't the try league. This is the get stuff done league." And that, I mean, that kind of resonated with me because it's like that makes it seem like more of a business. That makes it seem like, I mean, it is a business. It's a job. Get your job done.
That's it. And it's not only is it a job and get your job done, but this is what I learned too is like you don't think that general manager is getting heat because your star shortstop's not putting it up, and so you're paying this guy money. So now I'm the GM, and I'm like, oh yeah, I made this decision, and well, maybe we can trade this guy. Maybe we can bring in somebody else because I don't want to have to deal with me getting my job speculated because of a decision I made. Like, there's a lot of different things that go on, and when people are like, oh, why is he holding out for $100,000 more? Well, literally teams will keep guys, and you've seen this, guys in the minor leagues
Yeah.
past a certain time so they don't have to pay them a year in advance. So although the season starts and you're like, dude, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. should be on this team from day one. And like, oh,
Yep.
well, he's got to work on defense and blah, 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 blah. Goes down the minor leagues. Once that date reaches a certain point where it's like, okay, he's no longer able to go to arbitration, which means now you make more money. Now it's instead of his second year, his third year, let's call it May 25th. That's the cutoff. May 26th, he gets called up, and they're like, oh, his defense is good. And you're like, no, you just wanted to save that extra year of control and paying him the league minimum.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about that, that could be your first year of arbitration. You can go from making $500,000 to $10 million.
Yeah.
And so
Wasn't it Chris Bryant? Was it Chris Bryant or
yeah,
Anthony Rizzo that actually won that dispute that
I
said they did service time manipulation?
well, Chris Bryant might have been it because Chris Bryant was the guy that everybody was like, hey, make this team, and they sent him down. And then it's
Yeah.
like, then after the date, oh, he miraculously in a month and a half, oh, now his defense is perfect and everything is ready to go. No, everybody knows what it's done. But on the flip side, if you're a team management and I say, hey, you have Vlad Guerrero for 6 more years or 5 more years, which one are you going to take? You're going to take the 6.
Yeah.
So they're going to manipulate it.
So would there just be an argument to change the ruling on that to make it the beginning of the season as opposed to like 6 weeks into the season?
Of course, but then you think about this. So if you're an owner, are you gonna? That's why
Yeah.
the CBA is about to come up, right? This is
Yeah.
negotiations are about to happen.
Yeah.
So when you talk about give and take, they're gonna say, okay, yeah, well, we'll change that, no problem. Now let's put a salary cap. I'm like, oh no, we're not gonna do a salary cap. Well, then, so it's like
Yeah.
that's the give and take of. And baseball is really the only sport that's never given in, if you think about it, because it's the only sport without a quote unquote salary cap. They have the luxury tax, which
Yeah.
which kind of gives you a little bit of a salary cap, but it's not.
Yeah. Like if teams are going to spend money, they're going to spend money and they'll pay the luxury tax after the fact.
Exactly. But again, when you start to go like, oh well, why can't let's make the arbitration thing different? Like, okay, I'm all right. Well, if I'm going to have to pay him $10 million as opposed to 560, the league minimum, well then let's talk about other things that I want. I want more revenue sharing, or let's add more playoff teams because that's where owners
Yeah.
make money, right? Like this is the crazy part of what the business side.
Mm-hmm. The the business side of sports that could be a whole podcast in itself. That probably is.
Well, I mean, it is because it's people don't realize all the little things, manipulations, and things that go on,
Yeah.
and it's just part of the. Again, when you learn as a player that it's a business, and you learn that quick, then you're in a better spot. Because think about all the guys that learned the hard way of that it's a business. A lot of guys do.
Yeah. Now, one thing you said before was, the Spanish speaking guys hang out with Spanish speaking guys and the English speaking guys. As a catcher, you got to be able to communicate with everybody. But you're a Spanish speaking guy.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find that really helped you communicate with all the players on the field? And do you see guys like trying to learn more in other languages just to try to communicate better, or like what goes on there?
Well, yeah, for me, it was obviously a huge advantage because, I would be able to talk to everybody. And
Mhm.
really, in baseball, majority are English and Spanish speakers. You might have a Korean, or you might have a Japanese guy, and that might be where you have a translator. But other than that, really, I was able to talk to everybody. Sometimes it was awkward because I was having to translate in situations that I did not want to translate in, like a manager calling in somebody and saying stuff to a Spanish guy, and the Spanish guy saying things back to the manager, and I would have to like change what he was saying because I knew if I said what he said wasn't a good situation. Like like little
Yeah.
things like that. But I will say this, the Marlins have done a good job, and I'm sure that other organizations do this, but the Marlins have done a real good job of, because when you were a Spanish player and you didn't speak English, you had to take English class,
Yeah.
right? They made Spanish players take English class. But if you were an English speaker and you didn't speak Spanish, it just is what it is.
Yeah.
So now the Marlins make both of them take classes.
Oh,
English, learn Spanish, Spanish, learn English, which I think is great because then not only does it help them out as human beings, as
yeah.
really being able to make a world a better place where you can have conversations with multiple people. Also, you're working with these guys, and so why not have each other understand each other? Because that's a big part of the game. Of you really don't have that in any other sport, as far as like the NFL or the NBA. Maybe in hockey a little bit more because you have different players from all over the world. But in baseball, I
Mhm.
mean, more than half the league is Spanish, and more than half, then so you have to have those conversations because if you're with those guys every day, how are you not gonna make everybody around you better?
Yeah. Does that make when you were out there, did it make the Spanish speaking guys feel more comfortable knowing that you had a grasp on things?
Oh, I'm sure it did.
Yeah.
You would just being able to have those conversations, and you can go out there and talk to them,
Hmm.
you know? And so for sure it makes it more comfortable. But it's one of those things that again, I applaud the Marlins because the Marlins have, and I don't know if other organizations do or don't do it, but they've been one of the first ones to go like, hey, English speakers need to learn some Spanish too, like need to learn like their culture, because
Yeah.
that I think that's where there's a big divide is when guys would, you think about it in the clubhouse, all TVs are on English,
Yeah.
you know, everything else is in English in general, and some of them don't know what the heck's going on,
Yeah.
and so that's not easy. And then think about it, the biggest fights in clubhouse are over music. Like, man, I don't want to listen to this music. Well, what about our music? What about this music? Like little things like that that really do make a difference and can like separate a team.
Yeah. Who gets to pick the music?
Usually the veteran, but when I was a rookie, this was back when iPods, which is kind of funny even now thinking I'm like, dang, man, I'm getting old, but iPods, they had me when I was a rookie go to everybody and say, "Hey, what kind of music do you want? What kind of music do you want? What kind of music do you want?" And make a playlist and just shuffle it so that if it was Spanish or country or rock or rap or whatever, like it would just shuffle around to what people wanted because there was a lot of times where even on like heated exchanges of like, "Hey, turn that music down. I don't want to hear it anymore." "Oh, make me come and turn it down." Like stuff like that was happening, which
Sounds like
was
it's out of a movie.
yeah, but it's dumb, but it is.
Yeah.
And some teams, the starting pitcher gets to decide what the music is that day, right? So you
Okay.
come into the clubhouse, if you're starting and you like a certain kind of music, that's the music that's on for that day. If I'm starting and I like a certain kind of music, that's the music that's on because it's your one day to
Yeah.
play.
Okay. Now you were a position player. You were a catcher, but I was reading the stats, and you have 1 inning of pitching on the mound. What was that like stepping onto a professional mound? Now it's a bit of a blowout game,
Yeah.
but as a
Well,
catcher, what was it like to step? You're in the center of the field. Not that you're not when you're a hitter, but it's just that isolating. Like you're the one guy, and that's not your thing. What was that like?
honestly, I loved it because I hadn't pitched since I was 12 years old, and then all of a sudden I'm pitching and I'm running out of a major league bullpen, running onto a major league mound, and I was like, it doesn't matter if I suck. This is awesome. Like no
Yeah.
one, you're just kind of trying to save the bullpen. And what the funniest thing about this, and I tell this to everybody, is like, imagine I had been a catcher my entire career,
Yeah.
right? So I've only looked one way my entire career. So if you think about it, my vantage has always been to a big part of the field, center field.
Yeah.
When I was standing on the mound, I was like, holy crap, this thing looks big because it was like close, tall, and it was a view that I had never had before. So I'm sitting here going like, holy smokes, man, this stadium's a lot bigger than I even realized it. Like
Yeah.
you start to realize like how big it is because as a catcher, it's really always just open. You never really
Yeah.
have any
You
kind of that view.
you're looking at the familiar of all the bases and the position players and the wall,
Yeah,
and then you
but
turn around, you're like,
here it's
yeah,
like batter, fans, stadium, and you're like, and then all I can think is like, please don't hit it back at me. Like I just don't want to get hit. You guys can hit the ball everywhere, but just don't hit it back at me.
yeah. The guy, and then as a hitter in that situation, like there's no win. Like you hit a home run, you look like the bad guy.
Yeah, yeah,
You strike out, you're like, why'd you strike out to that guy?
yeah. It's. I always tell people like when they're like, "Oh, he just got that inning out," and I'm like, "That's because literally, it's the worst at bat ever for a hitter. Like if you hit the ball first pitch that he throws you hit it and you put it in play, you run and you're out. You're like, thank God I don't because if you walk, it's like, dude, you just walked against a freaking position player. You hit a home run, like you said, it's like, dude, what the heck? I can't believe you did that. If you strike out, everybody's laughing. So it's like
Yeah,
literally when I would face those guys, I was like, swinging the first pitch, hit a ground ball, run the first base, perfect. I'm out. I'm happy.
yeah. Reminds me, like I know this is gonna go a little bit deep for some people listening to this podcast, but the Freddie Freeman, Anthony Rizzo
Oh yeah,
strikeout. That
yeah.
was Anthony Rizzo's first baseman, and he struck out Freddie Freeman, who's
The Hall of Fame.
is he yeah. And it was just these guys are just laughing on the field. They know what's going on.
Yeah.
And they're
Well,
having a good time with it.
that's the fun part of it, right? So
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, and if there's a position player on the mound, one team or the other is getting their ass kicked. So
Yeah.
it's kind of the way it's like, okay, well, that's you're at that point in the game.
Yeah. There's only one exception to that right now. And that's Shohei Ohtani.
Well, yeah, well,
That's
that's not fun for anybody.
no. All right. On that note, I want to thank you, JP. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate this. Super insightful, and I hope some people are able to open up a little bit after hearing your experiences and some of the things you've dealt with in your career.
Cool, man. Well, I appreciate it, and thank you for having me. And again, I hope that if anybody does get to watch this or hear this or however it may be, like ask for help. Like you said, that's huge because you're not alone. That's the one thing I tell people is like, man, you're literally not alone.
Awesome. All right, JP. Actually, before we go, where can everybody find you? I got your socials coming up here, but where can they find you other than there?
Well, I mean, Twitter, Instagram, this. Some people will send me messages. I don't get to answer all of them, but there's some that I will, and we've, have conversations. So, I mean, again, that's pretty much it. Other than that, um, if you see me on the street, just say hi.
Check out the Marlins broadcast next season.
Yep. I mean, you can see me on there too.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot, JP. I appreciate your time. We'll talk
All right,
soon.
Justin. See ya.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hit that like button and subscribe down below for more content coming soon from WODProof.